Welcome to a discussion on our post-pandemic future. While there has been significant coverage of the devastating effects of COVID-19 on our society and the world, today we really want to focus on the importance of cultivating resilience and moving forward to a bright and really beautiful future. Many lessons have been learned during this time, and we believe that now, more than ever before, we have to focus on cultivating our spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being, leading to a whole, complete, and dare I say it, happy life, despite of our circumstances. But it's also not enough to focus just on our own individual well-being. We have seen over the past few months that we are all, in fact, connected. We have seen that the choices our businesses and our politicians have made and the consequences of choosing economics over people. The most important part of this whole being approach is how it's applied, which is why today we're here to identify the key factors that impact personal and global happiness. So I'd like to start by quickly introducing myself and my co-facilitator Svetlana, and then we will turn it over to our three phenomenal expert panelists, Dr. Tal Ben Shahar, Ambassador Hamid Al-Bayati, and Dr. Judy Kuriansky. And we're going to reserve about the last 10 minutes of this conversation for a brief mindfulness experience to really integrate all of our learnings and insights. So Svetlana, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Elena, first of all, thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction, and big thank you to our panelists for being here with us. My name is Svetlana Kisilyova, and I am a second-year SMBI student at Columbia University College, pursuing my master's degree in psychology. I am also a 500-hour certified yoga instructor and meditation teacher with a private coaching practice where I offer an alternative to traditional therapy interventions to help people to facilitate sustainable, positive change. It is also my personal belief that happiness is our birthright. So Alina, back to you.
Thank you. So my name is Alina Tabul, and I am also a master's student at Columbia University Teachers College, and I'm focusing on organizational psychology and graduating later this month. And I am also practicing executive coach and consultant, focusing on empowering people to thrive personally and professionally. So working with clients and seeing the business and political response of our current COVID-19 crisis and really the anxiety and panic that I've seen led me to search for answers. And I am so grateful that Tal Ben Shahar always has them and is here today to share his expertise. So Tal, I am humbled to call you a friend and a mentor, and he is a prolific author of numerous bestsellers and lecturer who taught the most popular course ever at Harvard University on positive psychology, and now teaches happiness studies at Columbia University. He's a serial entrepreneur and co-founder of the Happiness Studies Academy, and more exciting projects than I could name. So Tal, can you please start us off by explaining what is happiness studies and what is the importance of this discipline for building our bright post-pandemic future post-COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Alina. Thank you, Svetlana. And it's great to be here. You know that many people during this period of the coronavirus have been questioning the value of the field of happiness studies. Just last week, a friend of mine said, Tal, I think you should quarantine happiness until this is over. And my answer to him, to them, is that I think that happiness studies is most important now. It's most important now. It's certainly very important in terms of what happens after. Why? You see, happiness studies or the field of the science of happiness contributes to our well-being when things are going well. So let's say we're at a 3, happiness studies can help us go to a 4, 5, 6, help us become happier and happier. But what happens when things are not going well, when we're in the negative, when we're feeling down, when we're anxious? What happens then? Then happiness studies can help us better deal with the situation. We often talk about resilience. What is resilience? Resilience is actually a term that's taken from engineering. It's the ability of a certain material to return to its original form. So you have a ball, for instance, you squish it and it's resilient, so it goes back to where it was before. Or you drop it and it bounces back up to its previous point. That's why we talk about bouncing back. So that's an important and interesting concept that's obviously relevant, and happiness studies can help us become more resilient through its various tools, techniques, approaches. But there's more, because I think it's not just resilience that happiness studies can contribute to us. It can help us become more anti-fragile. Now, anti-fragile is a term coined by Nassim Taleb, who's a professor at NYU. And anti-fragile is the opposite of fragile. So fragile means something breaks. Anti-fragile means not only does it not break, it actually gets stronger as a result of the stress that's being put on it. A very simple example is we see with some physiological measures, muscles, for instance. You go to the gym and you lift weights. What happens to the muscles? They actually break down. But then if you rest a little bit after the gym, they actually become stronger than they were before. In other words, the metaphorical ball doesn't just bounce back up, it bounces up higher than before. That's anti-fragility. And this is where the science of happiness can come in, and this is where it can help. It can make us anti-fragile, meaning we can emerge from this situation even stronger. How? First of all, by acknowledging emotions. There is what people are experiencing right now are extreme emotions and complex emotions. So extreme emotions, well, that's obvious. People are more anxious now, whether it's about their health, the health of their loved ones. They're also more anxious about their financial future. So people experience higher levels of anxiety and other painful emotions, such as frustration, being locked up with the same person or same family, no matter how wonderful and amazing that person and family is, can lead to a great deal of frustration, sometimes anger. So we experience these painful emotions, but it's not just painful emotions. I had a recent conversation with a friend on Zoom. It was just the two of us. And at some point, he leans over and says he's now spending time. He's in Europe. He's spending time just he and his wife. His kids are out the home. He says, we're feeling really grateful and happy. Now, the reason why he was whispering, this was Zoom. We were the only ones there, was because he felt guilty about it. How can I feel happy or grateful now when so many people are struggling? So we're experiencing pleasurable emotions, but they're more complex because there's also guilt involved. So what do you do with all this onslaught, this flood of emotions? The first step is embracing these emotions, accepting them, what I've come to call giving ourselves the permission to be human. And when we do that, when we really, truly embrace these emotions, we're becoming anti-fragile. In the words of Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, in his wonderful book, The Poet, which I'm right now rereading with my kids, the advantage of quarantine, they have nowhere to run. He talks about the fact that every painful emotion is equivalent to us expanding our capacity to feel emotions, pleasurable emotions as well. And by embracing the sorrow, he says, we are also opening ourselves up to joy. So this is the anti-fragility, the growth, the development that can come during this period. And as Nietzsche said it best, if it doesn't kill us, potentially it can make us stronger.
Thank you, Tal. That's really great. Do you think you can also elaborate on the SPIRE framework, because it might help for people to understand what are the components of well-being and what could they really do to thrive?
Sure. So when you ask most people, what is happiness? Their answer would usually be something around pleasure. I was so happy lying on the beach, or, this ice cream made me so happy. This is though, while pleasure is certainly important for happiness, it's only one aspect of happiness. The way I define happiness, and again, this is an operational definition, it's not the ultimate truth, it's a helpful definition, is comprising 5 elements. The first element of happiness is spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being is about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life. Of course, it can come through religion, but it doesn't have to be. People who experience a deep sense of significance and meaning in their work are experiencing spirituality. Spirituality also comes from being connected to the present moment, to any phenomenon, because if we truly look at natural phenomena, we realize that we're living, as Einstein said, being part of a miracle. So spirituality is about being connected to the present. It's about a sense of meaning and purpose. Then there is physical well-being. Of course, health matters. What we eat matters for our happiness. Physical exercise matters a great deal to our psychological well-being. Sleep, rest in general matters, and so on. So that's physical well-being. The third element is intellectual well-being. That there is research showing that people who are curious, who ask questions, who constantly learn, actually live longer. Not to mention the fact that they're also happier. So curiosity, being a lifelong learner, contributes a great deal to happiness. Then there is relational, interpersonal well-being, #1 predictor of happiness, quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. And finally, of course, emotional well-being, which also matters. And emotional well-being means cultivating pleasurable emotions, such as gratitude, appreciation, kindness, generosity, as well as dealing with painful emotions. What do I do when I experience anxiety? Do I reject it, or do I embrace it? What do I do with frustration or anger or disappointment or envy? So these 5 elements, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being, together they make up the SPIRE acronym. And it's an apt acronym because SPIRE is also the highest point. And as Aristotle mentioned, happiness is the highest point, the goal, the objective that all other goals, all other ends lead to.
Thank you. That's so beautiful and inspiring. So now I know that curiosity did not, in fact, kill the cat.
The opposite, right?
The opposite. So could you please share how these perspectives and the framework, the SPIRE framework, can actually impact the national perceptions of happiness? So from the World Happiness Report that just came out in March, we know that the Nordic countries and countries in Latin America as well are consistently ranked as the happiest. And so the question is, what factors contribute to the happiness of citizens of these happiest countries? And will these factors actually make these countries the most resilient coming out of COVID?
Yeah, great. So, first of all, I love these studies, and the UN is really investing in these indices, as well as promoting GNH, gross national happiness, in addition to GNP, gross national product. And I think what's most interesting about these studies is why are some countries ranked high and others less so. For example, why are countries like Denmark and Norway, like Costa Rica and Colombia, like Israel and Australia, why are these countries consistently the happiest countries in the world, whereas other countries like the US or Singapore or Germany are not ranked very high? So obviously it's not money. Well, at least it's not money beyond a certain point, because poverty is not good for happiness, and alleviating poverty nationally, internationally, individually is obviously the top priority. Thinking of Maslow's hierarchy, you first want the basics. But once the basics are met, what determines happiness? It's not additional wealth. What is it? It's one thing, and this is based on research done by Sonia Lubimirsky and Daniel Kahneman and others. the one predictor of national levels of happiness is social support, relationships. You know, this is research done at Harvard, 75 years following Harvard graduates as well as individuals from the community near Harvard, looking at them and following them for 75 years between 1939 and 2014, and collecting quite literally millions of data points about their lives. And after 75 years, they asked, what is the number one predictor of happiness? And the answer was relationships. They asked the second question, what is the number one predictor of physical health? Number one predictor, you guessed it, relationships. It's not that nutrition didn't matter, of course it does. It's not that exercise doesn't matter, it does a great deal for both health and happiness. But number one predictor is relationships on the individual level and on a national level. Social support is important for happiness. And as I mentioned before, when you're talking about happiness, yes, you're talking about getting someone from the 3 to the 5. You're also talking about getting someone from that -5 to the -3, or hopefully to the positive on the scale. So it's relationships, it's social support that are so important anytime, especially in difficult times. As the British philosopher Francis Bacon said 400 years ago or so, he said, friendship doubles joy and cuts grief in half. It is also one of the best predictors of the ability to grow from hardship. In other words, of anti-fragility.
Thank you, Tal. That's really helpful. And in fact, I do remember from the World Happiness Report, there was a lot of discussion about trust. And trust was defined as exactly that, the relationships that we have with each other, the relationships we have in our governments, and that it's all based on knowing that there is someone there that can help you when you fall. So I think this is a really great segue now to introduce Ambassador Hamid Al-Bayati. And in addition to being responsible for drafting the UN resolution that established World Happiness Day, the ambassador was the Deputy Foreign Minister of Iraq for Political Affairs and Bilateral Relations. He then went on to become the permanent representative of Iraq to the UN and was elected chairman of the Third Committee of the 61st UN General Assembly. Ambassador Al-Bayati is also an adjunct professor at Fordham and Rutgers and an author of numerous books. And Svetlana and I had the immense pleasure of meeting the ambassador when he shared his expertise as a guest lecturer at the Psychology of the UN course at Columbia University, taught by our amazing third panelist, Dr. Judy Kuriansky. And as Tal mentioned, it's true that the UN is doing so much to support happiness, and which is why before I turn it over to the ambassador, I'd like to share just about 3 minutes of a video that he shared with us when he came to the class.
When I was president of General Assembly, he came to me. He said, there is something I like to work with you on it. You can help me. I said, what? He said, let's celebrate the day of happiness in the world. And I said, well, I love this. And happiness is not just being happy. It came from Bhutan, because Bhutan is supposed to be the happiest country in the world. And happiness related to sustainable development, of course. But it's great to be happy. When you are happy, you become positive. When you are positive, you become creative, and you become a good citizen. So we worked hard, and today, on 20th of March, there is President Resolution. The international community celebrate the International Day of Happiness in the world. Thank you, Ambassador.
In 2012, I went with a team of World Happiness Project including two grandsons of Nelson Mandela of South Africa. To the President of the General Assembly, went to the Secretary General, and we proposed to adopt a certain day in the year, which is considered as International Day of Happiness. It was adopted by consensus, and all the countries, all member states agreed that 20th of March will be the International Day of Happiness.
The President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and the United Nations, and we all are working for the welfare of the people of the world. The UN was formed and intended to be a peacekeeping guardian, helping to make treaties and resolve conflict. The UN matured into a humanitarian body and looks to help countries through disasters, both natural and man-made. The objectives adopted in the UN, such as peace, respect for human rights, eradication of poverty, sustainable development, Millennium Development Goals, green economy, eradication of poverty, and all these, especially empowering women, are all for one objective, which is the happiness of all the people of humanity. Happiness means peace, education, jobs, health, prosperity, and what we value most each day. Therefore, I urge the President of the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and the UN to adopt an International Day of Happiness.
Really amazing, and I think we'd love to hear some inside information of how did you pull this off with consensus? How is it possible that all of these countries agreed to do this? And what was it about the country of Bhutan? Why did they decide to originate this idea? And we'd love to hear from you about this amazing experience.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be with you all. Bhutan, back in 1972, which is a long time ago, proposed what they called national happiness or gross national happiness as an indicator of progress and prosperity instead of GDP, which is general domestic products. However, and they, of course, they had meetings at the UN in which they promote their ideas. The king of Bhutan who proposed that idea a long time ago, as I said. However, there was no International Day of Happiness. It happened that I met two of grandson of the great leader Nelson Mandela, and they were promoting some kind of profit work and non-profit, organization in Africa. And I met a photographer who went to African countries, tried to see what happiness means for people in Africa, which is the poorest continent in this world. And then we had this idea of having a team, and you saw photographs of that team meeting Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly at that time. So when we went to the President of the General Assembly and we suggest to have an International Day of Happiness, he said, you have to draft a resolution and submit it under the name of my country. Of course, I was representing Iraq at the United Nations then. So I submitted the draft to the president, and he said, you have to get me around 125 member states to support the resolution in order to be able to pass it in the General Assembly. So I start negotiating with some countries, especially friendly countries and allies, and I found some resistance from the United States, from United Kingdom, European Union, Pakistan, India, and other countries. So I start hard negotiation to accommodate their objections. So some of them objected to the date, and we managed to reach an agreement to consider March 20th as the day of International Day of Happiness. Then some countries suggest that we should add well-being to happiness, which we add to the resolution, and so on and so forth. So from my work at the UN as a chair of the 3rd Committee, the 6th Committee, chair of UN Disarmament Commission, being Vice President of the General Assembly, I learned to compromise, to meet in the middle, and to accommodate other people, objections. I couldn't believe that we end up having consensus. And at the UN, if any resolution drafted by a country from the East, it will be, of course, rejected by the West, naturally and normally. And if it's from the North, objection come from the South. It's from a developed countries, come from the developing countries, so on and so forth. Whoever familiar with the UN knows what the contradiction there. So we managed to get that resolution adopted, but I raised the idea of having International Day of Happiness, as you saw in the video in the General Assembly, in many meetings. And even I hosted some meetings, Secretary General, as you saw in the video, in which Secretary General talked, Michelle Bachelet, former president of Chile, who was elected by Secretary General as the first Under Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, which we managed to create after 3 years of struggle at the UN. So all those efforts with the team of advocates of happiness from many countries, we managed really to push that resolution, which was adopted. And the first year, on March 20th, 2013, Dr. Judy and I was on a panel to celebrate at the UN for the first time the International Day of Happiness. Bhutan had the idea of happiness as I said, indicator of progress and prosperity, but they never had the idea of having International Day of Happiness. And to be honest, even in 2019 World Happiness Report, I don't know, for some reason, Bhutan was 95 in the rank among other countries. Scandinavian countries in Scandinavia is very well known of being the leading, like Denmark, Sweden, and other countries. But Bhutan is a poor country. Maybe that's one of the reasons they don't have the money to really promote happiness in the world, or to show why they could be a happy country. And since then, I felt that that movement is getting momentum. More and more people, organizations, and states start to celebrate this day, especially United Arab Emirates. They have a minister, the first minister in the world of happiness. And that minister came to the UN a couple of years ago, and we had a big celebration. Dr. Judy and I were there, and so on and so forth. So I'm happy that this idea is very important. And I will add to what Tal said, which is the importance of happiness is for everybody, and it is mentally, psychologically, and even physically. I mean, with this time of COVID-19 or coronavirus, it's obvious that happy people could fight diseases and viruses more than unhappy or pessimistic people. And this is well documented by experts and doctors. So now there are so many organizations in the world, and I'm happy that this movement become a big movement, and many states. Now, Secretary General at that time selected a team to have the World Happiness Report, and every year we have this report published to show which countries in the world, which one is #1, and so on and so forth, in order to show happiness according to reply by government of those states. I believe happiness is important, and this time specifically people sitting at home with the lockdown, and that caused some kind of frustration and feeling isolated, and maybe some health problems. So happiness will help all those to go through this kind of crisis.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. It's really shocking, actually, that you were able to get all of these countries and get through all of their objections to be able to make this happen. And I think that maybe that says something for the world, that people will come together for, as Tal said, to self-actualize at the top of Maslow's pyramid. We all want the same thing, right?
Yes, correct.
So Svetlana, did you want to ask some questions about personal happiness as opposed to the country level happiness?
Yes, thank you again so much, both of you, for such a wonderful presentation. And we just heard from you how important it is to address the concept of happiness on the global level, at the UN, and from the country's perspective. However, I think it's important to remember that the country and the world are only as happy as every citizen and individual that is living here. There is an interesting fact that I would like to mention, and Professor Shahar and Alina slightly touched on that topic already. So according to the World Happiness Report, trust, generosity, and strong sense of community relationship are just as important as income when it comes to happiness. Now that all these factors are being negatively affected by the pandemic, the question remains, what can we all do on a personal level during this unprecedented time to become more resilient? And in spite of all these challenges, how can we find a way to achieve sustainable happiness? And obviously now I would like to pose a question to Ambassador Al-Bayati. Ambassador, I think you are the right person to ask this question for many reasons. And one of those reasons is the amazing, incredibly inspiring, and truly, I don't know, for me, heart-wrenching and touching story that you already shared with us in our class. Could you please share with all of us and our listeners your personal story of resilience and about the time when you were captured and tortured during Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq?
It's a sad story, and talking about happiness, I should tell you the positive side of that story. I participated in a funeral of 5 people who were executed by the regime. One of them was a close friend. They were activists against dictatorship. Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator who committed war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. He used chemical weapons against his own people and against neighboring countries. He invaded Kuwait, annexed it, and deleted from the map. Although Kuwait is a neighboring Arab country, but for him, he was trying to be controlling the whole region. So I was arrested and I was tortured. They tried to make me confess that I was part of a secret organization trying to topple the regime, and to confess to those who were with me, which means we will be all executed. I insist of being innocent. I denied all my activities against the regime. They didn't have material evidence. So after long torture in many security directorate, they sent me to a revolutionary court where there is no lawyer or attorney and nobody defend me, but the judge find no confession and no evidence. So he said, we will release you, but next time you will be executed if we're going to be arrested. When they came to arrest me again, I fled the country. I went to the UK, and from there I started a campaign against the regime, and I pledged to myself that I will not stay silent, and I have to support those who were imprisoned and tortured. Now in a prison, I have all the time to think of what should I do. Of course, they try to make me part of the regime, to join the Ba'ath Party, and then I will have all the privileges and this and that, which I rejected completely. To be honest, at that time, there was nobody around me to talk to but my God. And I'll give you an example. recently, all of us celebrate Easter, the Passover, and now we are fasting the month of Ramadan. So we are not eating or drinking anything from 4 o'clock in the morning, which is the dawn time, till 8 o'clock in the evening. That 16 hours of hunger and thirst make me feel how every single person feel hunger and thirst in the world, and make me dream of feeding every single hungry person in the world, especially babies and children. That's kind of belief which make me go through all that torture. I felt that God is the only body who can save me in that prison, is the only way to talk to. There's nobody to talk to except the walls of the room I'm in prison in. But God Almighty, who can change things and make me more stronger believer in God. And since then, I've been observing Ramadan for fasting. And by the end of Ramadan, we give charity for poor people. Last year at the UN, Dr. Judy was there. I announced that I will give 50% of what I own to help vulnerable people, especially widows and orphans. Because when I was in Europe, in exile, leading a campaign, it was a media and diplomatic campaign, political campaign against the regime. The regime executed 8 members of my family. Even when I went back to Iraq after 2003, I became a deputy foreign minister. I had a brother who was kidnapped and killed by the remnant of the regime. My mother, who lost all those members of the family, suffered a lot. The regime forced my mother and my sister to take the 3 bodies of family members to be buried, and they didn't allow any brother or any male member of the family to take the bodies. My mother even suffered by the regime putting her on TV as a threat to me when I was in London. But when I left, coming to the UN, I asked mother to leave with me, and she said, no, I will stay in my house. I will die in my house. And when I said, why? She said, I want to build a charity to help widows and orphans. So my mother, who is my hero, was my mentor, was everything for me, encouraged me while I was in prison, while I was active against the regime, and she never said a word asking me to stop. All those circumstances make me feel I have big responsibility towards my country, towards my people and my nation, and maybe human beings all over the world. During coronavirus now, I support a medical organization with 1,500 doctors worldwide and more staff, and they already lost doctors, nurses, and other staff because of COVID-19. They die in many countries in the world. Every day I see videos of people trying to help others, not only medically, but even those poor people, they take food. And recently sent me a video about a lady with diabetes, and she cannot go out. So they took food to her house, and they gave her and told her, whatever you need, call us. I also help other organizations who deliver food to elderly people. In our neighborhood, we went to every family we know with elderly people. The next door is actually a couple who are elderly and their children are outside the house, offering them help if they cannot get food. So I think real happiness is when you give more than when you take. And this makes me feel happy that I'm helping as many people as possible. And I wish I could help every hungry person, every needy person, as it especially vulnerable people like women, widows, and children.
Thank you, Ambassador, so much again for sharing this incredible story on resilience. And look what you were able to do in spite of those incredible adversities that you experienced. And you kind of answered my next question, but just maybe very briefly, how do you personally define happiness? And what makes you, Ambassador, really, really happy?
Being with you today make me happy because I'm participating in spreading the word, and each one of you also is helping with that. I have a theory which is called a drop of water. A drop of water at home means nothing for us, for all of us. But without a drop of water, we cannot have a glass of water or a bottle of water, a lake, a river, a sea, or an ocean. If each one of us, every human, may become a drop of water, we will be a tsunami which could change the whole world. So giving little is better than giving nothing. And if everybody give a little, like your time, you are spending time now, spending efforts, every one of you, that little will add to other people who are giving a little become big. That's one of the theories I adopt. Second, when you give, and I tried with many people, and they start to try it. When you give, you will feel happier than when you get. You will get more actually when you give. And that's the secret of happiness. That's my short answer to you.
Thank you again. It's amazing because you right here touched on my next question, and I guess you can just briefly reply to this. Can you recommend a practice that we all could implement in order to cultivate resilience and promote happiness in our daily lives?
Well, I like stories. And let me tell you, and Dr. Judy knows how many stories I tell. So this is a story of a very rich person, a millionaire, who said, they asked him, what's real happiness for you? He said, real happiness in the first time was for me to get a big house, you know, to buy the best car, until that's become very normal. I have all many cars and all kinds of palaces. Then real happiness was me to go into big project. So buying a football team or, you know, a sport team, having a big contract to build was, I thought was real happiness. But then the real happiness when a friend recommended to me to donate electric wheelchairs for handicapped children, which I did immediately because it's not a big deal for me. Then my friend insists that I will go and give these children the wheelchair. So I went, and the children, handicapped children, start to play with the wheelchairs because electric they were laughing from the deep of their heart, and I saw their happiness. But before I left, one of them grabbed my leg, and I tried to let go gently. He wouldn't let go. I bounced and asked him, do you need anything from me? He said, no, I want to remember your face, so I thank you in front of God on the judgment day. He said, that was the real happiness I felt in my life. So giving children, giving handicapped, giving needy people make me real happy. And I think if you try it and anybody try it, it will make everybody happy. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And right now, I think is a perfect time to turn the spotlight on our professor, Dr. Judy Kuriansky. Elena mentioned that we both are in Dr. Judy Kuriansky's UN and Psychology course. So Dr. Judy Kuriansky is a professor in Department of Clinical Psychology at Teachers College, Columbia University, and mental health advocate as an NGO representative at the United Nations, a first responder in disasters around the world, author of many books on relationships and international affairs, and well known for giving advice on radio and TV, newspapers, and magazines. So Dr. Kuriansky, thank you for being here with us. And you once shared with us that you provided psychological support during the Ebola epidemic in West Africa in 2015. And were in Hong Kong during SARS in 2003, as well as working on ground with survivors of several natural disasters, including natural disaster in China, Japan, and Iran. And on top of that, you were also a first responder after the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Could you please share with us and audience the most important lessons that you've learned from these experiences to hopefully allow all of us to integrate some of these lessons and practices into our lives during the COVID-19 pandemic and maybe after it?
Oh, thank you, Svetlana. And I'm so delighted to be here. I'm very proud of my two students, Svetlana and Alina. You're doing such a wonderful job, and appreciate being here so much with Professor Ben Shahar and also my dear friend, Ambassador Hamid Al-Bayati. We're talking about happiness, which makes us all smile, out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which makes us all so thoughtful and contemplative and really sad because of so much loss. But right now I'm feeling happy because you have brought us all together to talk about how we move forward from this, because there is a post period, and we do in psychology call it post-traumatic growth, which is the opposite of the post-traumatic stress, which is all that negativity that people have felt during this COVID-19 disaster, and also during all the events that you have just talked about. So let me address, in fact, some of those lessons, as you've asked for, Svetlana, from being around the world in many of these disasters. So from being in West Africa and Sierra Leone during the Ebola outbreak, I would say the lesson there was one of survival. And there is a true exercise there for everybody to use in their daily life, which is to feel that sense of you have survived, you made it through one of the worst experiences imaginable, and to feel that strength, call it resilience, call it whatever you want to, but it is that sense of survival. And after and during the Ebola epidemic, there were billboards everywhere celebrating the survivors. So we need to feel we have survived. And Professor Ben Shahar was talking about the bouncing ball of resilience. And so many times I used that technique with the burial teams, with the children all through West Africa. And here's the ball, that indeed, as he said, you bounce the ball. Everybody can do this now as an activity. Bounce the ball and say, yes, I've been depressed. Yes, I've been in quarantine. But, and as Ambassador Al-Bayati, even the worst of all, of, being in prison, and yet I can bounce back higher. So that's one lesson, you have survived. The other lesson from 9/11, which was very powerful, having been there and working with the firemen and the police in the pit, and walking around the pit at night, which was my assignment, the big issue there had a lot to do with comfort. This is a psychological principle too of contact comfort, which is so important in terms of hugging. We have physical distance now, not social distance. I like to call it physical distance because, as Professor Ben Shahar said, social support is extremely important. So we need to feel that hugging. So you need to hug a pillow or hug yourself. During 9/11 and many times even in the Middle East, when I was there during the Israeli-Palestinian uprising in various ways, we handed out these soft items, these little toys. And in 9/11, everybody sent teddy bears everywhere, and teddy bears are a very universal item. This is a note that says it's a gift from individuals who are thinking of you. We're sending our thoughts, our love, our solidarity, and our hugs. Hang in there. So everyone giving themselves contact comfort now is incredibly important, since we have to have this social distance. And in the post-traumatic growth situation, this will help us develop that sense of strength and resilience that we're talking about. And the third point I want to raise is something that Ambassador Al-Bayati was bringing up, and from his heart, that's so beautiful about what you have said and shared about how you have gone through all of that, and the message of helping. So in all the natural disasters that I have been out, that Svetlana, you asked me about and mentioned, in Haiti, in China, in Iran, in Japan, and even here in the United States, in the various storms that we've had, the major issue is that people have said, helping makes me feel better. And so I've written a great deal about helping helps the helper. It gives you the sense that you are doing something important. It gives you that sense of connection with others that Tal mentioned before, and really brings you into the unity and the togetherness that we're all talking about with regard to what the lesson has been from COVID-19. So I will just mention in closing about, I've done a pilot study about the silver lining of this very dark cloud of the pandemic, and that many of the people that I have interviewed, including students and including others, older persons, single people, married people, that the major thing also that I learned from doing the happiness walk, which was part of the International Day of Happiness, was, and asking all kinds of people, is that what makes them happy? What gives them that sense of comforting? And it is family and connection with others. And that's something that has happened during this time that I hope that we can continue, even though we might not be able to shake hands and things, is this sense of connectedness through family, and the silver lining being that sense of getting closer to others and closer inwardly to oneself, because the two of you, I know you're going to, Svetlana, lead a meditation, and you're an expert in yoga, and Alina, you know all of this from your coaching as well, that this sense of getting inward and self-awareness and closer to oneself and expanding, that people have had time to read, to refinish their furniture, to do their room, to do the things instead of this constant worrying. So that's internal. And the last thing I want to say is the expansion of the silver lining of loving others, because love is the answer, as the Beatles said. And it's what Ambassador Al-Bayati is saying, that there has been, even in this study that I have done, the pilot study, that people have developed an awareness of others, of the world, that we are beyond ourselves, that we're sensitive to poverty, to the homeless, to the children who have nothing, to the mothers, to the widows, to the pregnant women, to all those, to even the fathers, to everyone in the world who needs and who can gain from this sense that we're all in this together, we care about each other, and that we want to help each other. From the North and the South and the East and the West, all these events that Ambassador Al-Bayati and I have done at the UN, with other countries, by the way. Iraq has been a leader, Vietnam, Palau, UAE, Hungary, they have all, and so this gives us a sense that the world has come together besides our own growth.
Professor Kuriansky, thank you so much. This not only inspires us, I hope it gives everyone a hope and incentive to move through it and hopefully come out of this crisis stronger and better. And Elena, we can't hear you. Unmute yourself.
And I just wanted to say, I remember Dr. Kuriansky because we did the ball exercise actually in class.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that when you really do it, it does make a big difference. And Tal, we've talked about before about falling forward, and I really do think that it's very impactful when you can physically feel yourself and say these things to yourself. So it's very inspiring. And Tal, also with the small acts of kindness, is there anything you might want to conclude with? Because I know you speak about that a lot as well.
Yeah, the best way to help ourselves become happier is by helping others become happier. So to give is to receive. My favorite word in my mother tongue, which is Hebrew, the language of the Bible, is the word to give. And the word to give is the word Natan. So the name Nathan is actually Natan in the Bible. And if you spell it both in Hebrew and in Roman letters, it creates a palindrome, N-A-T-A-N. And that's no coincidence, because when we give, we're given right back. And giving is important always. It's especially important in difficult times, because what it does is it shifts us from being helpless to helpful. and therefore from hopeless to hopeful. And the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. So we can deal with sadness, we can deal with hardship, we can deal with difficulties when we have hope. And when we give and we receive and we create a culture of kindness, generosity, benevolence, that is a culture of supportive individuals, and it's a culture of resilient or anti-fragile individuals. So it's all about love, giving, kindness.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. And all three of you have given us so much time, and everyone is really going to appreciate from the TC community all of this, the research and the advice and the heartfelt stories. And I think that what you've given us today is going to have, as Ambassador Al-Bayati said, the ripple effects for really the whole community. And so we're so grateful for that. And speaking of trying to give to the greater community, I think now we can conclude with Svetlana's beautiful meditation, and it's a variation of the loving kindness meditation, where we'd really like to think about wishing loving kindness for the whole world. And we can actually turn off our cameras, and if you need to sign off, it's fine at this time, and we're going to go inward and really try to incorporate and integrate all of these amazing learnings and stories from you into this beautiful meditation. Thank you all again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. And we will take a moment right now to meditate. So it will be a brief meditation, but hopefully we'll all enjoy it. And at this point, I would welcome you to take a very deep, long breath all the way down to your lower abdominals. And as you exhale, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take another long, deep, loving breath all the way down to your lower belly. And as you exhale, begin to release and let go of any worries, any concerns. Release your fears, release your expectations. Begin to follow your breath, and every time you inhale, quietly in your mind state let, and every time you exhale, repeat go. Inhale let, exhale go. Inhale let, exhale go. Few more times, releasing and letting go on a deeper level. Listen to the soothing sound of your own breath as you're relaxing and letting go more and more. Take another long breath in. Breathe out. And now I welcome you to place your right hand over your heart and bring your left hand right on top of your right. Apply gentle pressure. And now begin to shift your focus entirely onto your heart area. Listen to your own heartbeat. Begin to feel whatever the magic that is happening right underneath of your palms. Take another long breath in, and as you breathe out, envision in your mind's eye someone or something you deeply, truly love. Someone or something you feel grateful for. See this person or this image as vividly as possible. And now begin to focus on feeling the feeling rather than thinking about it. Feel it in your body. Sense it in your heart space. Allow this feeling to grow and get stronger and bigger and bigger. Let it expand. And now, imagine that this feeling is so strong that it overtakes your entire being. And now, intentionally, direct the feeling of love, compassion, appreciation, and joy into all living beings walking this wonderful planet. See and envision every person, every living being feeling love, feeling peace, feeling joy. Stay with this feeling and repeat silently in your head with me. I inhale love, exhale compassion, inhale compassion, exhale love, inhale love, exhale compassion, inhale compassion, exhale love. Continue repeating it for the next few breaths that you take in and out. Inhale love, exhale compassion. Inhale compassion, exhale love. Now take another deep, long, soothing breath in. And as you exhale, release your hands and place them on your lap or wherever feels comfortable. And gently begin to welcome and bring yourself back into present moment. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, gently roll your head side to side. Take a breath in and stretch your arms towards the ceiling. If this feels comfortable, reach up, take a breath, and again, it's up to you. If you feel up to it, give yourself a hug. Give yourself a loving hug, exactly what Dr. Kuriansky suggested that we shall do now to get healthier, to get more resilient. Take a deep breath in, stretch up, bring your bottom arm on top, and again, embrace yourself. And if it doesn't feel good, don't do it, it's okay. But if you can, please do it. Take another breath in, and as you exhale, release your hands. And if you want to give yourself another hug, you're welcome to do that. Yes. So thank you all so very much. Thank you, our listeners. And most importantly, Elena and I want to express our deepest gratitude to our panelists. We are endlessly grateful to all of you for your contribution to the world, the concept of happiness, and for the time that you took today to dedicate this discussion to a very important topic during this very challenging time that filled with uncertainty. A time when it is essential for all of us to become more resilient, more present, and perhaps come out of this crisis stronger, better, and may I dare to say, even happier. Thank you all from the bottom of our heart for everything that you've done today and in your lifetime. And Alina, why don't you play the song for us to end on a very happy note. We all know the song, we all love it. And if you feel like moving a little bit and having a party, you're welcome to do that.